Okay, Geeta Dhyana. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf, and people of purified intellect are the drinkers. The milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent, and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. So we pick up with, we might remember this from Katha Upanishad. It's in multiple Upanishads, this next line. But here's the shloka we were with yesterday. Number 5, free from pride and delusion, victorious over the evil of attachment, dwelling constantly in the self, their desires having completely turned away. So having completely turned away, which is not the same as when we sublimate the desires or work to overcome the desires or transcend the desires or fulfill the desires. It's not the same as those. It's having turned away, which happens naturally, finally. That's the story of the princess of Kashi, if that was enjoyable. Freed from pairs of opposites, having known as pleasure and pain, the undiluted reach the eternal goal. Can you pick up here?
So in the story, basically, the analogy is that when you get realized, you drop all the desires. But I thought you have to drop them before you get realized.
As a practice. It's not that you have to drop them. You have to be very aware of them. Mm-hmm. And you have to choose them carefully. You choose your desires at some point. Huh? Is it so?
Saturday.
You've always done it. But in delusion, you've chosen desires that are not really uplifting. Hmm?
Yeah.
Okay. But various ideas present themselves. Again, look at the process. See the process. There's a feeling of I'm missing something. Are you familiar with the feeling? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I just put words to it, to a feeling. And the feeling exists without the words. That's the ego sense. Okay. And that's willing. And it's as it were in search of an idea to partner up with. And so you go through the storehouse of the mind and you say, what is it that will fulfill me? And it's the same, by the way, coming into spiritual path. But in delusion, we say, a new husband. Or a new car. Or a new job. Who's saying that? That's a part of the mental process, right? Rifling through the file folders of the mind. And intellect is rifling through the file folders of the mind, looking for something that will fill the hole. Mm-hmm. Yes? Okay. And naturally, at some point, you will have gone through all the file folders. Shankaracharya talks about 100 billion well-lived births, you know. Mm. So eventually you will have gone through all of the file folders. And you will naturally turn to a new one called inside.
Spirit. Yes.
You'll naturally do it. And you'll discover something there more meaningful.
Right.
Right, okay.
But that's even before you realize the self.
Of course it is.
Because in the story, the desire was just dropped after realizing that it was...
Correct. But the reason for the story is so that you can see it when you haven't realized the self and be discriminative about which desires you choose.
Okay.
Yes? You see?
Right.
And that's what's being shared here as well. It relates both to it naturally happens with the one who's realized, and they fall away. Where before that point, you're really having to be very careful. And look and see, is this desire actually going to uplift? What is the fruit? Is the fruit of it peace? Is the fruit of it detachment? Or is the fruit of it attachment to just another person? And putting myself in the same stuff once again, right?
Right.
So that's why it said yoga is the intensification of one's natural evolution. So when you have enough to recognize that this life is jarring, that there's something not quite right about it, and certainly everyone here has enough to recognize this. Yes, you want to see where we're going? Then if you submit yourself, some words will come to you from inside, but they look like they're coming from outside. And then now you have a choice, right? Now you have something new in the file folder. And you can say, I can desire this. And this is a healthy desire because I can have an idea of where it might go. So that's it. It happens naturally with the one who's realized, and therefore they've all fallen away. Where before that point, you're still having to check it out, make sure it's really going to be beneficial. Yes, and make sure to let go of it at the right time. Because otherwise it'll become another attachment.
Yeah.
So when one has done the work enough to receive the grace, then naturally they're done. Okay, but until that point, it's sadhana.
The desires can be very sneaky.
Yes.
I found living up on a mountain, it was my whole life, it was one trip to town a month. And so we never got fresh vegetables, but our biggest food source was probably rice.
Yes.
And I found even to this day, I was just realizing this, that I can't skip rice. I haven't been. I have to have some. So I'm it's not bad for me, but at the same time, it's I need to maybe say no to that sometimes.
Yeah. Here's the persistent factor that's at work is this I, me, mine. And that's actually the issue we're dealing with. It's not the desire itself. The same desire, desired for the benefit of all, and not me, selfless desire, uplifting. The same desire for me, because I need it, takes us down. So that's actually what we're working with. It's this I, me, mine bug. And so, and to that bug, this is nonsensical. Why would I do something if it's not for me? So even when that bug is so all-inclusive, then we even say, well, it's good for you to be selfless, and I'll show you why. Because it has to be, even being selfless has to be looked at from the perspective of, what do I get out of it? Does that make sense? Yeah. So a lot of the teaching of yoga has to do with that. What do you get out of being selfless?
Maybe you get self.
You get yourself.
That's it.
That's how pervasive this bug is. This avidya, this ignorance, it's this pervasive that we have to have a self-centered reason to be selfless. But having been given a reason that resonates with us, and this is my experience, having been given a reason that resonates with us, which will be very much centered around being free of suffering, which we used to think was being free of pain.
Right.
Right? We used to equate being free of suffering with being free of pain. And still, to a great extent, in the psyche, this equivocation is made. Right? And so we avoid that which might be painful just because it might be painful, equating suffering. But suffering is all we struggle with. Pain is not. Pain comes and goes, you know. And it's a fact of life. You can't avoid it. Emotional pain equivocated more with suffering. Physical pain, not. Physical pain is not the same. It doesn't have anything to do with suffering. Physical pain. But there's a program running in here that has I, me, mine all through it.
Comfort, yeah.
And so I'm constantly hearing from it. I, soul, am constantly hearing from it, the program, very loudly. I need to avoid, I must have, I should have, I don't have, but it's speaking to it's a bug. It's COVID.
It's real. Yeah.
It's a bug. It's a false idol. False idol. And this is what Jesus means when he says, don't worship false idols. It's a false idol. The ego is a false idol. And we bring to this voice, we bring all of that which is divine under its sway. But it's just a false notion, a false idea. So that's why the sadhana is to dealing with the desires and what's actually beneficial for me. And if you can see what's actually beneficial for me, you'll get to the point where you will be completely selfless. You'll be free of all of that. If you can actually live not under the notion of what do I need to be happy, as in what needs to come to me, which is the ego sense, in order to fill this void, but what's actually beneficial for me. If we ask the question and we're open and the mind, the intellect is becoming purified, now we'll hear the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and that will resonate. And you'll say, aha, this is what I have to do because I tried the other way, right? And it's lacking, it doesn't work. So we will have had the experience to know this too. Okay. So, nothing wrong. The more light we're able to bring to this desire machine, which is this mind, intellect, under the shadow of delusion, feeling separate or feeling a whole, the more light we're able to bring to this and actually look at it and do our best to look at it with clarity and exposing ourselves. This is why when we begin spiritual paths, satsang is what's most important. Satsang, because we have to hear it and it's going to have to resonate, because the choices that we make then are difficult choices. Right? The habits are very strong.
I wanted to say that I feel like in society they tackle specific things or objects or things as they label them as not beneficial or beneficial, and I feel like that's always for the individual, right? What's beneficial to each other. Yeah. But people get caught into what others think it's beneficial or not knowing the thing for them will not beneficial for them but beneficial for you. But the only way to know that is through the sadhana, through the silence, through just getting that guidance of what's beneficial for me.
Right. We need the guidance from the light.
True.
And then it is very much an individual thing, except this. There are principles that are absolutely universal. For example, the principle of the self, capital S self, being in selflessness, not putting the little self ahead.
And that's
So
where
that's a universal principle.
Right, that's where I found in silence that with that alignment, those habits naturally fade because the clarity comes, and then I realize, that habit was not actually beneficial.
Yeah, indeed. That's where Peace Pilgrim speaks about. It's both. It's inside and outside both. If we bring our ear to places that are uplifting outside, but then also cultivate silence inside. Okay, moving on. Number 6. And this is from Upanishads directly. Neither does the sun illumine there, nor the moon, nor the fire. Having gone there, they return not. This is my supreme abode. So speaking of the natural place, that's what comes, the natural place. The place without knots. If we can relate to all of this stuff that we picked up as knots that tie us up. So when we untie them all, we live in the place without knots. And the place without knots is the natural place. It is what's called God or the divine, or life without constriction, which isn't related to a body or not a body. Life without constriction is love everlasting, love pure, love absolute.
Could you call the knots samskaras?
Yeah, indeed. Actually, samskaras are memories, and that's how the knots are picked up. But the memories in and of themselves are okay. It's a part of the process. Vasanas, we could say, as well, which are the tendencies. But finally, the biggest knot is the ego sense. And when that's untied, when one withdraws themselves from it and recognizes that it's a false flag, and doesn't, and that in withdrawing, it can actually be set aside as if like that. And that's the biggest knot. Untying that, all of the rest are untied. And then this concept is the concept of the light, which is the underlying light, which is not the moon or the sun or fire, but the pure light, which is the substratum. We brought to an Upanishad class a couple of weeks ago. I went by Walmart and I picked up every kind of fire device that I could see. So we had different lighters with butane and such in them, and we had fire sticks, matches, and all of that, and just laid them out. And it was inspired. It was something I was guided to do in order to relate to the light, or the fire in this case, as being non-dual. You can look at them all and they're all different colors, the green and yellow and this and that, and all different shapes. And even the flame, when you light them or strike them, even the flame will be different in size and maybe color, but the light itself is non-dual. The fire itself is non-dual. And then there's the question, you can hold a match and say, can you see the fire here? And if you worked it out in the intellect, then you'd have to say, yes, it's just not manifest yet. But I see the fire stick, and therefore the fire is in it. It's simply not manifest yet. And in the same way, the spirit, the absolute, is within and without. Within and without. And so it's here. We could say not manifest, but it really just means I'm not seeing it. And why? Because I'm seeing the stick instead of the fire within the stick. Right? I'm seeing the person instead of seeing the divine within the person, which is actually the reality of the person. So it's that having gone there, having gone to this natural place, or having allowed ourselves to get back to the natural place of recognition of what's here everywhere, then one returns not to delusion. Thank God. It was a lot of work getting stuck in it, and it's a lot of work getting out of it. This is my supreme abode. So Lord saying, this is the highest. There's nothing higher. Those of us who have experience with the meditative state, and everyone has experience with the meditative state, it's just we confuse it with whatever the thing we say we like is. Right? The meditative state that you experience in the seated meditation is not different from the meditative state that you experienced previously when you were doing whatever you loved to do. Right? It's just now you have the ability to access it reliably without having to do something else in order to get it. Yeah. And also, therefore, you have the capacity to reside in it longer.
Yeah.
Before it seemed capricious. Yeah. So, but it's the same meditative state. And that is the supreme abode. That's what's being shared. That is the supreme abode. There's nothing higher. Okay. Oh. So there's something else to attain to. All that's needed is the absence of these knots. That's it. And the experience is, and from that place, there's no desire for anything else. There's no experience of a whole. Correct? H-O-L-E. Yeah, the experience is whole. Right? Oh. Okay, and then this. We can introduce number 7. An eternal portion of myself, having become a living soul in the world of life, draws to itself the 5 senses, with the mind for the 6th, abiding in nature. So this is the yoga of the supreme person or supreme spirit. And in this chapter, in this discourse, the Lord is helping us to see, again, who we are. And it's been established that the Lord is everything through the lower nature, the nature of nature, the gunas, the qualities, and therefore everything that we see, everything we taste, etc., is the reality of all of these. So lower nature, higher nature, the meditator inside of us, and the substratum for the entire universe. So Lord has already laid out a picture in here that says, I am all, I am everything. I am you, you are me. Yes? Tatamasi, that problem over there, that's also you. That's also me. I. And here, talking a little bit about the relationship and how it's done. So this soul that we imagine to be ourselves, or finally find something deeper within us, and we call it soul. The soul is none other than the absolute. And here he says, an eternal particle or portion. Now, the Lord is not like bread. So in other words, with bread, if you take an eternal portion of it, it's actually itself. And each little piece of bread has its own qualities, gross objects. With space, it's different, yes? If you try to take a portion of space, is there actually a difference between the portion that you try to take and the remaining portions? No. So in this case, it's spirit saying an eternal portion of myself. It's a teaching mechanism, as it were, but it's not. But it can't actually be separate. It's a beautiful commentary here from Swami. He says, the jiva, or the living soul, is the Lord himself. It has a mysterious dual relationship with the Supreme Being. Even as a cell in our body has a dual relation with us. If the cells do not constitute our body, what else is the body? Yet do we not refer to them as being different than the body? In its essential nature, the jiva is none other than God, yet in a mysterious way, which we call ignorance, on account of the fact that the soul thus ignores its identity with the Supreme Being. In a mysterious way, it deludes itself that it is an independent particle. Mm-hmm. This is this Maya, or this avidya. This individual independent existence, however, is in a way willed by God himself. This quote in the Vedas and Vedanta that he gives, it's a fundamental. When someone asks the question, okay then, I'm hearing, but why would there be this creation of a world then? Why? In most cases we'll hear, don't ask why, because it's a practical reality, and deal with getting yourself out of suffering. And once you're out, the question won't arise, why? But also sometimes the question is answered, and it's answered with this quote it gives. I am one, may I become many, or may I experience myself as many.
So I have a question.
Oh.
I was just thinking about. I do have I'm trying to understand what the word desire, because the way I see source is source with desire being source being desire itself, of expressing the infinite potentiality that will never ever stop and has always been there. So if that's a thing, hence, the continuation of this animal species or the human race through reproduction, it's for source to continue expression and creating. I do want to understand what does the scriptures and Vedanta or this tradition mean by desire, because when I hear desire, it kind of feels like negative connotation in the word, and I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, there's no judgmental connotation in the word. That's when you say negative, it's like somebody saying something's bad.
Yeah.
No one is saying anything's bad. No one's saying anything bad. This entire display, this entire world show, is God's show. There's nothing other than God. So there's nothing wrong.
Well, the reason I felt that way, or that was my reaction of thinking it was negative, because it says that you must cut the desires, cut them from the root, or those kind of statements. And I don't understand.
In order to have what you want, you have to stop this. And know who you are. Mm-hmm. And that's it. That's it. It's non-judgmental. It's non-judgmental. It's non-judgmental, completely so.
I'm just trying to understand, what does desire mean?
Well, there are desires which are selfless desires, and there are desires which are selfish desires. There's the path of the pleasant and the path of the good. For an individual, which doesn't exist as an individual. So for this imaginary being, this dream character, there's a way out of the dream. And there's a path given to come out of the dream, to wake up and recognize who you are. And then you can see the dream and enjoy it. But until now, the dream is a horror show. Until then, the dream is a horror show for you. And the only reason it's a horror show for you is you don't know what it is. You imagine it to be this, and you imagine it to be that. And from that state comes the desire for that which is pleasant and the avoidance of that which is painful. And that binds you to this dream, to this imaginary place. And when you're bound to the imaginary place, your experience is suffering. It's not pain, it's suffering.
So is that why it's so important to cultivate undisturbance? Because then I can step back from the experiences and enjoy life in that sense.
You can see it more broadly. You don't actually have a view of life when we're in this limited place. You don't have a view of life. You have an idea, you have a view of your idea of life. But that idea of life is also God's idea, but it's not the fullness of God's idea. It's only a tiny little portion of it. In the whole sea of God mind, it's an infinitesimal portion of it. And so it's like you're in a cavernous room which has everything within it, everything in the entire universe it has within it, but there's a pin right here in front of you, and at the tip of the pin there's an imaginary idea that here lies my happiness. And so you sit in this cavernous room and you stare day after day after day at the tip of this pin, wondering why you're not happy yet.
I see that.
So you have to broaden your view. You have to see life as it is. So sadhana is about this. It's about expansiveness. Expansiveness, being able to stand back, being able to see the totality of the life, being able to see all of the play, to be able to see whose play it is, to see who you are. So it's completely non-judgmental. It just relates to an understanding of what it is that we are and the state that we're experiencing, which is a very, very limited aspect. And in order to experience the fullness, one has to learn to step back. And step back far enough to see it all. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It really helps things.
Okay. Really, and people will get into judgment and all that, misunderstanding, not having reached it. And it becomes proselytizing and very judgmental and all of that. And in a very limited state, that's the tendency. But the more we're able to stand back, that tendency falls away. Like the idea, this religion, that religion, all of that. Well, this is all these are limited notions, limited ideas. And it's true from a certain perspective, very limited perspective. It's true based upon our experience, but back up and see the full picture. Okay, so we'll close. That shloka, the one that we just read, and we'll pick up there in the morning, is a famous one within the Krishna consciousness. There's a question. I'll just put the question here. And the question is the ultimate reality dual or non-dual? And the question, in a way, is a moot point. The meditator reaching the place of meditation, which can be reached through any of the four paths, and most efficaciously is reached through a combination of the four paths. That's Swami Shivananda, the yoga of synergy. The meditator doesn't think about how they got there and doesn't reflect on whether the ultimate reality is dual or non-dual. The meditator is free of all of that. And so where the argument comes in, dual, non-dual, is just on the way there. And the non-dualist, which is this lineage, would say, well, there's your proof, because there's not something else there. Yes?
Right.
But the non-dualist would say, well, but you got there by connecting to that which is higher than you. So we can honor both and continue to honor the principle. Although we will say from this perspective, there's only one meditator. And that meditator here calls himself Krishna. Oh. Okay, so we'll close with final prayer in RT, page 174. But supreme state, when we're not there and relating, because the fact that we all have experience with the supreme state. That's right, Mary, yes? We found it to be limited, but it's just that our experience of it was limited, right? But having come back out of it, it's still there. Right? That place which is blissful, that place which we experience when we've attained to something or experienced something that brought us out of ourselves, or yes? The place is unchanging, and here, to hear that's the supreme state, and also to confirm that's my experience, but I wondered why I couldn't stay there. I wondered why it didn't last. But the truth of the situation is, it does last. I come out of it, I fall out of it, as it were. I come out of it, or I lose my awareness of it. Yeah? Oh. Okay. Page 174. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Surandim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Surandim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Surandim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyanto Makashi Dukhabhave Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purna Mudashate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold Thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve Thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember Thee. Let us ever sing Thy glories. Let Thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in Thee forever and ever. Humble our Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all of the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai. Let's rise for our tea. Oh, good morning, Raiden. No.